So from one form of aquaculture, which Ken Whelan was actually talking about, Jim, about ranching, which is a really interesting idea, what he's really trying to say to help anglers. You know, he is saying wild fish are over here, they still need to be saved, but maybe we need to be looking at ranching as an innovative technique that can actually be part ways of a solution for anglers and angling. He's obviously making it clear it's not a solution for wild fish, but maybe for anglers it's a solution to be considered more. And a really interesting topic, and obviously stirred a lot as well in terms of the discussion.
Well, I think Ken is invaluable in that respect. He certainly makes an otherwise reasonably complicated situation abundantly clear. I certainly fell foul of using the wrong terminology, and I'm sure others will too. And hopefully he has explained things there so that we can go forward and go, okay, I can make up my own mind now about what I think the salmon need when it comes to either aquaculture and ranching, which is a form of aquaculture, or perhaps nuanced stocking, which is more of a conservation angle. There's a whole spectrum of how we can tackle these problems. But it would be remiss of us not to revisit the story that's unfolding in Iceland. We promised you in episode 1 of this first season of The Last Salmon that we would keep you updated on what's happening in Iceland with regards Parliament. Just to give you a recap, 1% of the country, which I think is some 3,000 people, pitched up a Parliament in protest to let the politicians know that they weren't happy with the huge escapee drama that unfolded last autumn, and they wanted aquaculture be banned or certainly regulated much better than it is at the moment. And there were bills that were being drafted currently and since then that were due to be heard in Parliament, but I think for one reason or another, it's a very contentious issue, so it's been stalled. Anyway, we thought we should catch up with Elvar Fridriksson from the North Atlantic Salmon Fund and Jasper Pääkkönen, Patagonia ambassador and general Atlantic salmon aficionado, and find out from them what's going on in Iceland.
It's a really interesting topic, this, and it's a nice way this is the last episode in series 1. And we thought it would be a nice way to wrap it up, round it all up. We started with Iceland. We had hoped with 1% of the population coming out to protest against the escapees of farm salmon, that perhaps this is a tipping point, that perhaps we're going to see real change. And we were hopeful of that real change. However, it's a case maybe of 2 steps forwards, 1 step back. This battle is ongoing. This battle hasn't changed. This battle hasn't stopped. And Elvar and Jasper are going to explain to us why it's so important and what they're going to keep doing to keep fighting.
We saw the first draft of the bill, and there was good stuff in there. There was, obviously what we want and the majority of the people in Iceland want is for the industry to be banned. However, when we saw the first drafts of the bill, there was penalties in there that could actually really have an effect. So if these companies were to have an escape, that would mean a permanent reduction of their production capabilities, right? And as we all know, this is about, these companies are worth a lot of money because they have permits to produce masses of fish. So if you can cut into that, that really bites. And there were, punishments for a lot of things, escapes, sea lice, mortalities. So like I said, it wasn't exactly what we were hoping for, but it was definitely, a positive step in the right direction. And it was at that time where people were invited to submit comments, right? And there were a record number of comments that were submitted to the bill, and an overwhelming majority of them, 87% to be exact, demanded that the industry be banned. But there was one set of comments that seemed to be more important and carry more weight than others, and that was from the lobby group that represents the salmon farming industry. And the theme of those comments were, to put it into a few words, they kept referring to constitutional rights to employment, rightful expectations, and ownership, right? And if you bring all that together, that reads, if you touch us, we'll sue you for damages. And that seems to have had quite an effect, because the next time we saw a draft of the bill, it was significantly weaker than it was in the first round, and especially regarding the punishments. So it's been disappointing watching the parliament and democracy at work here. It's very much giving into threats of this industry and not really listening to the people and not really following what they say is the goal of the bill, which is to do this in harmony with nature and salmon, by the way, which we know can't be done, but that's nonetheless the goal of the bill.
What's the public discourse been like on this then, Elvar? Are people aware of this, how it's been watered down, and is there public anger then? Like, what's the public lobbying, that side of it?
Yeah, I mean, there's huge awareness around this. I mean, it's really unbelievable. It seems like everybody in this country is aware. They have some degree of knowledge about this bill or about the controversy around this industry. And there was huge outrage last fall when we had the escape, which kind of sparked all of this. And then there's been a lot of outrage as well this spring when we started to see these, weaker drafts of the bill. However, what has been probably the most discussed thing, and what many MPs in Parliament have latched onto, is the fact that in the bill they were proposing that the permits for the industry be indefinite. And it's kind of funny to a lot of politicians latched onto this very recently, even though they had heard about this from NGOs months ago. They might have seen a political opportunity or something in this. I don't know. But that has sparked a lot of outrage, and I think I'm pretty sure that they're going to reverse that article in the bill, so they're going to be temporary. But that just shows you where this was headed. Indefinite free use of our fjords, really, for these companies that the population of Iceland doesn't want.
Is that your impression, Jasper? I know you're over in you're not in Iceland at the moment.
I'm also hearing some of this information for the first time. This is obviously a developing story. What really blows my mind is the fact that now we go back to something that I think we discussed in our previous conversation before, is the fact that Iceland is so passionate in protecting its unique horses. It's a great example of how upside down and backwards this whole situation with Icelandic salmon and protecting the original salmon populations of Iceland is. And for the ones who haven't heard of this horse example before, Elvar, correct me if I'm wrong, but the unique Icelandic horse population is protected in a way that nothing can. The protection and the measures are taken to an extreme. If you ever take an Icelandic horse out of Iceland, you can never bring it back to Iceland. They're very careful in protecting the existing population by setting rules and regulations, making sure that nothing can damage the horses and their health. And now we've got something just as important, just as crucial part of Iceland and what Iceland is known for, what Iceland's nature is about. It's unique salmon populations, and it seems like the Icelandic decision makers are ready and willing to let that all go and jeopardize these last remaining salmon populations. It's really shocking to see how blind and just oblivious they seem to be to what they're doing, what they're actually deciding on.
Elvar, if indeed what you're saying is the case, and the majority of the Icelandic population society are anti-agricultural, certainly anti, shall I say, supporting the bills that we all want to be passed through that we've just discussed, where's the disconnect? I mean, we all know politicians move to the beat of their own drum to a certain extent, but when it comes to voting, if it's such a slam dunk that people are behind it, where's the disconnect?
in my opinion, it's a municipal issue, right? I mean, it's salmon farming is only operated in two parts of the country, and that's the West Fjords and the East Fjords. And I think actually we touched on this briefly in our last conversation as well. Is that these are areas that have been economically deprived for quite some time. So the promise of jobs seems to outweigh just about anything, right? And it's frustrating because it's such short-term thinking, right? It's always putting a Band-Aid on a massive gaping wound, and this is the latest idea, to save these villages with open net pen fish farming. Only like 12 years ago or something, that there were plans to build an oil refinery in that area, right? And now it's fish farming, and in my mind, there's just a lack of political willpower to think further ahead and actually be a champion at this and make the right decision, even though it may hurt right now. It's going to be the right decision in the long term. And it seems that so many politicians are willing to look the other way because there is an industry there that is currently supplying jobs. So, salmon and environment, screw it. There's jobs. And I think that's the same for every country where this industry operates, right?
Absolutely. That's their calling card. That's their ace, isn't it, up the sleeve?
For the listeners who don't necessarily remember or know this topic that well, can you also speak a little bit about the financial significance and the economic significance of salmon in Iceland, for example, from the farmer's perspective? Because it's so mind-blowing in my opinion that they're making these decisions now and they're letting all of this go, because it's not just about saving the salmon, saving nature, being an environmentalist and looking at it from like a green perspective, but salmon plays a humongous significance in the economy of the country as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's a huge point in all of this. I mean, like I said, this industry operates in two parts of the country, right? And yes, I mean, they are creating some jobs. I mean, nobody's saying they're not creating jobs, but we are talking about relatively few jobs, and I think it's like 0.2% of the job market in Iceland right now. That being said, of course, most people do not live in those areas. So when this industry is at its maximum, they will be creating a few hundred jobs. But at the same time, there's 2,250 farms in Iceland that depend on direct income from the wild salmon populations, right? They depend on those salmon populations being healthy and returning to the rivers. So people from all over the world come to visit these rivers and, bring in, and they pay really good money for that. And there are so many of those farms that would not be able to sustain in those areas if it wasn't for that. So yes, you're creating jobs, but I mean, you're putting so much more at risk, and actually a lot more jobs at risk. And that's only the farmers, right? Then we have yet to talk about, the guides, the chefs, the drivers, the servers, everybody who's working around the salmon rivers during the season. That's a huge part of who we are and have been for such a long time. I mean, people have been coming here to fish for salmon, not just for a few years, but I mean for about 150 years, and they seem to be able to sacrifice this. And believe me, this is not ignorance. I mean, they know this. Like, this has been brought to their attention multiple times, and when the escape happened last year, it was those farmers and those guides and those volunteers that were left doing the dirty work, trying to trying to get as many of these farm salmon out of the rivers as possible. It wasn't the company themselves. It wasn't the MPs. It was the people in the country, right? And now they're just trying to force this industry through anyway.
Picking up on Simon Setra's book, The New Fish, and I think I mentioned in the last episode, John Kaldal, the spokesman for the Icelandic Wildlife Fund, and just those comments keep staying with me. And if you wouldn't mind, I'll just read them out, the ones that I highlighted from the New Fish book. Kaldal says we have to argue with people who view the world through Excel sheets. It's not about being for or against food production and jobs. It's about choice of technology. He talks about aquaculture and the need for, the closed pen system. But he's keen to point out also that the Atlantic salmon being put in the Icelandic pens is Norwegian, different from the Icelandic salmon. But the worst thing is, he says, he talks about the sufferers in terms of the salmon tourism and the farming economy, as we've mentioned earlier. But he says the worst thing is we don't need salmon farming. We know from other countries it will have a negative impact on important parts of the economy, such as tourism and farmers' income. Jobs in salmon production are in the low-income part of the labour market, and we don't need more jobs like that. You said it, Jasper, like the economic argument makes no sense at all either.
So something is off here. If there's 1% of the country that gets so emboldened and passionate and fired up by the escapee situation and the threat of what that might do to the fisheries and to their livelihoods and to the farming up on those fjords and in the country in general, and yet we're talking about hundreds of jobs, a few hundred jobs, as important as that is. Let's not take away from that. Employment is absolutely crucial, especially in this day and age. This imbalance between those numbers means that we're missing. There's something in this puzzle that we're missing, that there's something going on, that these politicians are turning a blind eye to the numbers, to the votes, to the things that are very important to them as politicians.
I always say that, people should make their own assumptions, right? But the first thing the industry did when they were starting up shop here is they hired the Speaker of the House in Parliament as their head lobbyist. They went to the West Fjords and they went to the East Fjords, and they hired really prominent figures in the right-wing politics to go to training in Norway. And then upon their return, they were no longer municipal politicians. They were employees or directors or managers of the salmon farming companies. People can make their own assumptions, but
are they also not just, from what you're saying, Elvar, is they're actually playing the game and they're winning the game because they're influencing the people whose votes count in terms of passing the bill. The lobbying, you just mentioned there how it changed from draft 1 to draft 2. So they're obviously spending so much in terms of lobbying. That's working. They hire the right people in the areas to influence those regions. What I'm just saying is we know from speaking to, the likes of Simon and speaking to yourself in the series, how they play this game, and they're winning.
We will win them. Let's put it that way. We will fucking win them because this is just not right. And this will not stand. It will maybe do so for now, for a little bit, but it will not forever. They are playing the game. And it's not that is catching anybody off guard. It's just who has the money and the resources to play that game except them.
What can we do? Jasper, firstly to you, seems this particular narrative, this particular story feels like it might reach a conclusion soon. It might not be the conclusion that we all want, but there is still time. What can we do?
It's a great question. Just like you said, like you all mentioned, these companies have endless pockets. Some of the deepest pockets in the world of any industries. Multi-billion euro, multi-billion dollar publicly listed companies, Norwegian billionaires behind them. But it's also a question of, it's well established that this industry is one of the dirtiest, one of the most harmful, relatively new industries to hit this planet. We're not just talking about these unique salmon populations. Salmon is obviously an indicator species that indicates something much larger, much more important, much bigger. In the environment. When the salmon populations are thriving, generally speaking, their environments are thriving as well. And when they are not thriving, when they're at risk, endangered, like Atlantic salmon now is, it means that it's about much more than just a species. These salmon farms are leaving dead zones in the fjords, wherever they get established. All that's left behind is dead sea bottom, and the effects on the environment are devastating. So I think it's just a matter of time until people come to their senses unfortunately, Icelandic politicians haven't yet come to their senses, and there's a risk that they have to learn the hard way. I mean, Iceland is already learning the hard way, but how hard do you have to learn? How deep do you have to hit rock bottom for it to register, and for the local politicians, the people in power, to understand that this is not the way to treat our environment and to treat the planet, that there has to be other solutions. This is the big question. And obviously the easy answer to what needs to be done is for everybody to keep on campaigning and to sort of bring this topic and keep it up and keep the conversation going. But also on a broader spectrum, I think what needs to be done is educate people on not to eat farmed salmon. Open net pen raised salmon should face boycotting all around the world, and it is already facing boycotting. But this is something that the large population, the biggest part of the consumers have no idea about. And this is also a problem that stems from the salmon farming industry having endless amount of resources and money to put into lobbying, sort of lobbying, PR lobbying as well. I mean, the amount of effort and money they put into putting out positive stories about farmed salmon and how healthy it is and how, borderline superfood. It's actually an investment to your health to be eating farmed salmon. This is the narrative that we keep on seeing that's being put out by the salmon farming industry. And the other side of the coin needs to be brought to life and brought to light as well.
So we need to call them out and question everything they're saying, and just keep spreading awareness, boycotting, buying the food, eating the food, educate our friends, talk about it, keep it on the table. Excuse the pun. Keep the conversation on the table. I think so. I think it's certainly working. People that I know aren't eating salmon anymore, just don't eat Atlantic salmon. And that's purely because of conversations I've had with them and images I've shown them. So it's a really powerful narrative to follow, that one, to boycott buying it and eating it. Over to you, Elvar, tell us what we can do.
I think we kind of have to break this up into short term and long term. I mean, firstly, I would like to echo Jasper's points and yours about that this is ultimately a consumer thing, right? I mean, if there is no demand, then there will be no supply. But something that I've seen in my work and in my travels is that there are a lot of people who are very much against this industry, but there's sushi on the table, they'll have a bite. We're at the point now where there should be no compromise, and I'm saying this very specifically to the listeners of this podcast, that like people who are really passionate about salmon, there's just no time for compromise anymore, right? There has to be a boycott, and it has to be a complete boycott. Some people are not buying farmed salmon in the supermarket, but they have no trouble eating it if it's being served at a social event or something like that. We have to be very hard line about this. We're at that point. And I think we've been able to educate the consumer here in Iceland, but we are a tiny population, right? So tackling that on a global scale is a different animal, but it can be done. It was done by the salmon farming industry. I mean, they are so popular because of marketing. That's it. It's just 40, 50 years of really good marketing.
We just need to demarket their market, right?
That's right. But in the short term, I mean, speaking for Iceland, we are still in the thick of it here. I mean, this bill has not been passed through Parliament, and it may not be passed this spring. There's a possibility that it will get pushed until the fall, and we can use all the help we can get in terms of people writing about this online. There are email addresses for every single member of Parliament available in Iceland. Let's tell them what you think. Tell them what the world thinks about this.
Is the campaign Let's Undo This, is that still live, and is that still something that our listeners can get behind?
Yes, absolutely. So we did deliver last week 46,000 signatures to Parliament, and that's thanks to the many people who signed the petition. But the petition is still live because, I mean, the bill, like I said, has not been approved yet. But we felt it was important to deliver those signatures because, Parliament is coming to a close, and it was absolutely essential to give this to the ministers, and tell them that the world is watching. But that petition at letsundothis.com is still up and running. There's a lot of information on there as well that can help educate people, and if you sign up to the petition, you'll get updates as well with what you can do to help. So I encourage everybody to do that.
We urge our listeners to do what they can in the short window of opportunity that we have left to remind the Icelandic politicians that all eyes are on them. What they do will have echoes for years to come. With regards to the potential damage that we're looking at with all these thousands of escaped farm salmon that have now, as we know, gone up all the hundreds of rivers on the northwestern fjords there in Iceland, beautiful, pristine salmon rivers. And we know that they've gone all the way up to the spawning grounds. We have evidence of that, despite what the fish farmers say. These fish are, Jasper, it was you, I think, who was talking about this from recollection on the first conversation. These fish, contrary to what the farmers tell us, are strong enough to reach the spawning grounds and to breed, to spawn with the wild stock. When might we be seeing the fallout from that? Because my thoughts are it's going to potentially take some visual catastrophic evidence to finally change, as it often does, it'll be too little too late, but to change the minds of the powers that be. When are we going to start seeing or through research, reading about conclusive evidence that shows that escapees damage irreparably the wild stock?
I would say it's probably going to be a couple of years until we see the full extent of the genetic damage from last year's escape. But that being said, it's really important for people to know that the damage is not only done by one massive escape. It's a constant leak. There's a constant flow of escapees from this industry. And one fish per metric ton is kind of the rule of thumb here. And as long as the salmon farming companies are not required to tag or somehow visually distinguish these fish from the wild ones, then they will never be caught, all of them, right? So it's a slow burn until it's too late. And if we just look at Norway, it's 70% of the salmon populations are genetically polluted there, and that's not because of one or two massive escapes. I mean, it's because of that, but then it's because of 40 years of constant escapes. And yeah, so I mean, we'll know more about the exact damage of this escape in a couple of years' time when you start seeing smolts and juveniles, from those fish. But the damage is already taking place, and it's only going to get worse if this continues.
Sounds like a cancer, doesn't it? Leaching into the rivers there. These beautiful, I can't stress enough, these rivers in Iceland are what all rivers once were and should be. They are clean, cold water, pristine ecosystems for wild Atlantic salmon, one of the last bastions left on Earth for these incredible creatures. And these wild fish are just escaping, sometimes in events like the storm that hit them in autumn last year. But they are, as Elvar says, they are leaching like a cancer on a daily basis. These escapees are getting out of these open nets, and they are going upriver, and they are wreaking havoc on the DNA of the wild stock.
I think if there's one thing we've learned, Jim, from the first episode of this series, we started with Iceland. We thought maybe there's a glimmer of hope here, and we still hope, in terms of kind of people's willingness to keep fighting. But if anything that this shows is The game keeps playing. You got to keep fighting. You got to keep playing better. You got to keep playing stronger. There's no stopping. There's no remaining, standing still. This is an ongoing battle.
This is a war of attrition. We may lose this battle, but we will win the war. I'm with Elvar and with Jasper. I believe in the good will out and the truth will out. And I think when the world finally realizes the nefarious nature and the amount of bullshit that they've been fed about organic, sustainable salmon, Atlantic salmon, that right now still millions of people think is crazily good for them, is very healthy, is sustainably farmed. When that truth comes out, I have a feeling, the tables will turn.
Absolutely. And this bill that is being discussed here now, we did this in 2019 as well, right? So we're here in 2024 now. We'll be here again in 2028, regardless. It doesn't matter what the outcome of this bill will be. I mean, we're going to keep fighting for the salmon. And I do think that, despite very concerning efforts from decision makers, and that I think it's important to recognize that we're slowly but surely headed in the right direction in many ways. There's I would say the biggest positive about this bill is that they are making the rest of the shoreline of Iceland a free, like a legally binding free zone from fish farming, right? So we gotta recognize that this is a slow burn, and it's gonna take a while until people realize what is right here. But yeah, we'll be here next time around as well. And this battle isn't lost yet.
You've got the pipes of Bjork, the Queen of Iceland, singing for the salmon. You've got the will, the acumen, the passion, and the experience of all you wonderful, wonderful NGOs and campaigners such as Elvar and Jasper. We just will keep watching. You have our support 100%. Please ask of us whatever you need, and we will keep fighting for the salmon on your behalf. It's absolutely crucial that Iceland does not give in to aquaculture.
My conclusion is echoing Elvar when he said that the listeners of this podcast are the ones that really, really have the responsibility of doing the right thing. I mean, the people who would tune in to listen to something like this, they or we are the ones that should really be hard on a topic like this, and there are no compromises. If it's not the anglers, the angling community, and the community that is really passionate about saving the salmon, that shows an example and leads the way, there can't be any compromises. If it's not this community, then nobody else is going to do it. So there's a big responsibility on everybody's shoulders here, and I think every listener should keep that in mind and spread the word.
I think that's brilliant, Jasper. I think you're right. Anglers, next time you're angry that you haven't seen a salmon, that you haven't caught a salmon, that you spent money on a salmon trip and there haven't been any around, just every time you lose a salmon or don't catch a salmon, a Norwegian billionaire makes some more money. Think about that. Take your passion and your anger out on that and fight for our salmon and spread awareness and stop eating it.
Elvar, Jasper, thank you very much for joining us, and we do hope we will keep fighting the fight, and we will keep in touch with you to see how the battle goes.
Will do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Isn't that enlightening, Daire? Can you believe it? The powers of aquaculture have somehow managed to get their claws into the parliamentary system of Iceland, and things aren't quite going the way that the country, or the people of the country, at least I'm told, reliably informed, want them to go.
Watch this space. This is not a story that has ended or will be ending anytime soon. And as Jasper put it so well there at the end, this is for anglers. This is the message for anglers, for the salmon angling community that are listening to this podcast, have listened to us throughout the series across 12 episodes where we covered aquaculture, we covered activism, we covered hatcheries, we covered ranching, we covered angling, we covered every gamut and every angle to it. But as Jasper says, rightly says at the end, now is the time. There's no more compromises. Now is the time. If you can't take action, if you can't step forward, the listeners listening to this podcast, of all podcasts, what hope then is there for the salmon?
Absolutely. I think it's such a call to arms for everybody listening to this podcast with regards to aquaculture. At least really have a good think about whether, if you still buy Atlantic salmon from the fishmongers or the supermarket or in restaurants, wherever you might be thinking about eating this stuff, maybe think about what you've learned on this podcast, because it really is the most powerful way to change opinion and to change culture is from the consumer end. And if us consumers stop eating and demanding this stuff, then they'll have no choice but to stop supplying it, stop farming it in the way they're currently doing. And I think that, if I may be so bold, that spans out across the whole of season 1. I've learned a lot about fish handling. I've learned a lot about ranching. I've learned a lot about what's going on out at sea for the salmon. And there's a lot to digest, but I think if our listeners, if we can urge you, if we can ask you for one thing, it really is to have a think about where you think the salmon has a future in your life and how you can help it achieve that, how you can help stem the bleed of the wild Atlantic salmon with everything that you've heard over these past 12 episodes.
Well, Jim, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. I still haven't got to meet you in person, haven't got to cast a line with you yet, but we will.
And I want to thank you, my friend. For those people that don't know, Daire reached out to me last summer with this brilliant idea, which I think is such a beautifully crafted idea to tell the story of the salmon and educate anglers and educate people beyond just the riverbank about its plight. And I thank you for bringing this idea to me. It really is. I think we have to keep telling the story. We have to keep going. There's so much more to say. There's so much more to do. As we know from this first series, we've only just begun with the fight for our salmon, and we urge everybody to please keep in the fight for our salmon.